Hello viewers, welcome to True Crime Diaries. This is your Chris Barker. This is a case about a man kidnaps woman from side of the road and stores her body in freezer for years. Denise Huber, 23, had a great time at a Morrissey concert in Inglewood. Her boyfriend Stephen Horrocks was unable to attend the event, but he ensured that their mutual friend Robert Calvert kept her company. Denise finally said goodbye to Robert at 2 a.m. on June 3, 1991, after a wonderful outing together. Robert had no idea this was the last time he'd see Denise. Denise's parents, Ione and Dennis, were terrified the next day when they discovered their daughter's room was empty. Denise had worked that day, and she rarely missed a shift. The parents contacted Denise's friend Tammy Brown to inquire about Denise's whereabouts. But she, too, was clueless. Tammy would later find Denise's Honda sedan parked on the side of the road at the Corona del Mar 73 freeway. Denise's home in Newport Beach, Orange County, was nearby. The car's rear tire was flat, and the indicators were flashing menacingly. The car was unlocked, but Denise and her belongings were nowhere to be found. Denise appeared to have gone out to seek assistance in changing the tire, but where could she have gone? There were some payphones and motels nearby, but if she went there, where has she gone? Unfortunately, answering this question would take years. Orange County, California, saw a massive search in the weeks following Denise's disappearance. Posters, billboards, and television advertisements were used to solicit any information that could lead to Denise's location. However, there was no breakthrough. The cops had no solid evidence. Sniffer dogs had detected a scent from Denise's car, but the trail had vanished just 25 meters down the motorway. Despite widespread public interest, the case was doomed to fail. 3 years later, however, the truth would be revealed. Elaine Canalia and Jack Court, along with his 10-year-old grandson, were pulling into John Famalaro's driveway on July 13, 1994. They had met Mr. Famalaro at a local market a few days before, and he had promised to sell paint at a reduced price. Elaine and Jack were at Famalaro's house to take advantage of this offer. It was a simple transaction, but Famalaro appeared overly flustered and rushed throughout. He rushed through the paint cans, shoving them into Canalia's truck with his bare hands. He was not the same person they had met at the market. When Court's grandson asked permission to use Famalaro's restroom, he refused, claiming that the water had been turned off. Famalaro seemed to want Elaine and Jack off his property as soon as possible. Famalaro claimed to have relocated to Arizona 6 months before. Canalia felt this claim and the state of Famalaro's property did not add up after taking a good look at it. His home was littered with junk boxes, hundreds of paint cans, and debris. On top of that, there was a rental truck that didn't appear to have been moved in a long time. If Famalaro had settled 6 months before, what was a rental truck with a Maine license plate doing on his property? Was it a stolen vehicle? Elaine was not going to keep her suspicions to herself. She wrote down the truck's license plate and gave it to the cops. The officers ran the license plate and discovered that it was a truck that had been reported missing 6 months before. Police obtained a search warrant and went to Famalaro's residence. The officers noticed an electric cord running from a house to the truck, but no one answered the door. This house, next to Famalaro's, belonged to his mother. At first glance, the entire electric setup appeared to be a meth lab operating in the truck's back. Famalaro could have been a meth cook who became uneasy when Elaine and Jack came dangerously close to his lab. Narcotics detectives arrived soon after, and when they broke through the truck's rear lock, they discovered more paint cans. The freezer in the center of these cans was locked and sealed, but it was powered by the electrical cord they had seen earlier. It was game on. When they opened the freezer, the cargo was filled with the horrible stench of decaying flesh. Inside the freezer, a detective noticed what appeared to be a human arm wrapped in a plastic cover. He knew it wasn't a narcotics investigation, it was time to call in the homicide squad. More detectives arrived on the scene. After removing several layers of plastic bags from the freezer, a handcuffed human body was discovered inside. The corpse's blood and bodily fluids were frozen at the bottom of the freezer. The head of the body was wrapped in white plastic bags. The entire truck was transported to a crime laboratory. By the evening, detectives had arrived at Famalaro's house to arrest him. Meanwhile, another team of cops raided Famalaro's home. Famalaro had saved a nail puller, a purse, and a hammer, both stained with blood, as well as a credit card and a driver's license, in 2 Christmas boxes. Denise Huber was the owner of the license and card. The autopsy would later confirm that Famalaro had Denise's body inside the truck. Denise had been missing for 3 years, but every item she had from that dreadful night was still with Famalaro. Denise's dress, high-heeled shoes, car key, and compact lipstick were all easily found. Further investigation revealed that Famalaro had also collected newspaper columns about Denise's disappearance. Investigators suspected Famalaro of being a serial killer. They discovered items belonging to other women in several boxes inside his home. Some of these items could be traced back to women who were safe, but others could not. Officers were unable to obtain an answer because Famalaro maintained a nonchalant, disinterested demeanor throughout, refusing to cooperate with the force. But, at the very least, the autopsy report and overwhelming evidence adequately explained Denise's disappearance. There was no evidence of a fight near Denise's car. So it's safe to assume Famalaro enticed her out of the car by offering to change her flat tire. Perhaps she was already standing outside the car, looking for help. We don't know what ploy he used to gain Denise's trust, but one theory suggests he was dressed in a police uniform. Several uniforms were recovered from his home. He rendered Denise unconscious, duct-taped her face, and cuffed her hands once she was inside his car. Then he drove to his Laguna Hills warehouse, where he was currently living and working. The scraping on Denise's high-heeled shoes suggested he dragged her unconscious body to the house. Famalaro sexually assaulted Denise in this location. As a gag, a fabric ball was used. The rape attempt was confirmed by Famalaro's degraded sperm from the victim's rectal samples. When Famalaro was finished, he wrapped a white plastic bag around Denise's head and swung the hammer at her head as many as 31 times. The plastic bag was used to keep the blood from splattering all over the room. However, some of the blood stains remained intact behind the dry walls of this house, allowing the officers to obtain a DNA match. The forensic experts reassembled broken pieces of her skull with great difficulty, but some were beyond repair. He purchased a freezer unit 9 days after Denise's disappearance and hid her body inside. Famalaro had kept receipts for every purchase, including this freezer unit, making retracing his steps a breeze. John Famalaro had a difficult childhood, surrounded by a religious, overbearing mother and a father who couldn't stand up to his wife. His mother, Anna Famalaro, decided where her children would sit, who they would talk to, and what they would own. Relationships with people of the opposite sex were strictly prohibited. Marion, John's sister, grew tired of her mother's diktats, and Anna severed all ties with her. Warren Famalaro was sentenced to 5 years in prison for child molesting in 1980. John grew up in his mother's shadow and was never able to live a normal life or have a healthy relationship. Over time, John had several relationships, but he always found a way to ruin them. He once tied one of his dates to a metal bar next to a hotel window and left her naked with the curtains and window doors open. He thought his date would enjoy the sick joke, but she never opened her door to him again. Another woman claimed Famalaro took her to the desert and attempted to strangle her. She could overpower him, and she ran naked through the desert for her life. Other relationships went well thanks to Famalaro's smooth-talking abilities, but the weirdo in him emerged at some point, mostly through his preference for cuffs. All of the women saw the red flag and fled from him. John Famalaro was sentenced to death for murder, sodomy, and kidnapping on May 22, 1997. Mr. Famalaro, however, is still on death row at the San Quentin State Prison in California. My thought about John Famalaro. With an unhealthy childhood, poor parenting, and no positive influences, it's easy to see how John became the monster he is. What do you think about John Famalaro's case? I really appreciate your feedback.